Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
There's an issue going on today dealing with trade, international trade, and it looks like it's coming to a climactic end. Hopefully it'll be favorable by common sense prevailing. And I'm talking about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They've been negotiating for 5 years. We're having a little trouble knowing exactly what's going on because they decided it was too important for the people to know, or most members of government to know, other than just very special. And I'm just wondering whether it's something like, what was it Pelosi said about the Obamacare? Well, we had to pass it to find out what's in it. Do you think this is the case? Do you think that that's when we're going to find out, or what's going on?
I remember when we were dealing with CAFTA back in the office, it was a big, huge, cumbersome, several binders long treaty, but at least we had the chance to look through it and to pick out the things and to criticize the things we thought were bad. But this shows a breathtaking level of contempt that Washington has for the American citizens. They've made it not only secret now, but secret into the future, years into the future. The only people that can see it are members of Congress and the Senate in a special, sensitive, classified room.
No notes.
But they also let 500 corporate leaders have special access to look over it. But the rest of us mere taxpayers have no opportunity to look at this.
My guess is it'll sound very populist in dealing with the people, but I think agreements like this are directed toward protecting the 1%, the moneyed interest, the banking industries, the large corporations, and never the little guy. But so far, the average American doesn't know much about it and probably doesn't care too much. But the issue, the American people know, because they know the economy is bad, and a lot of time this arouses a populist sentiment. You know, tariffs. There's a couple presidential candidates say, yeah, tariffs, keep them out, don't trade. And this is a natural reaction. So when the people know about this, there's going to be a lot of support against this, because they don't want they want protectionism, and they read this as free trade. Of course, the protectionists and the people who want to have tariffs, I'm in a way agreeing with them on the transition, but for different reasons. They want protectionism, and not passing this bill would help them. I don't like the bill because I'm not for managed trade, and believe me, this is managed trade at its worst.
Yeah, according to Public Citizen, which is the Nader group, who we worked with closely on CAFTA, as you say, it was a tactical alliance because we didn't agree ultimately on what trade should look like, but we agreed that CAFTA was worse than the status quo, or what they wanted. But according to Public Citizen, only 5 of the 29 chapters of the TPP, which some of these have been leaked thanks to WikiLeaks, some of these versions of the agreement, only 5 of the 29 deal with trade in the real classic sense of trade. So that is a lot up for...
Yeah, and these other items are big items for special interest groups, and that's why they don't want them to get organized, because they will deal with wages and unions, environmentalism, and human rights, and you can think of all the can of worms they'll open with that. And it is going to be a big boost for world government. This is the main reason to be opposed to it, because they're moving us rapidly to a huge increase in big government and world government. But at the same time, it's a constitutional issue. I've always voted against fast track. And the principle is very simple, because the Congress has a responsibility to regulate international commerce, world commerce. That's an explicit authority given to the Congress. And yet, fast track comes along. Instead of amending the Constitution, if they want the president to run roughshod over and deal with all the international trade, they should, change the Constitution, which they never do. They just ignore it. So the Congress passes a bill, and even if you were for it, you should be against it if you were a constitutionalist, because what it does is it turns the responsibility over to the president. Then he joins in on these secret negotiations that you're not allowed to even know about. And then when it comes back to the Congress, they're not allowed to amend it. I mean, if you think of government out of control, usually we just think of the federal government out of control running roughshod over all the smaller units of government. But here is an endorsement from the people, because we allow our members of Congress to vote for fast track, deliver this power to the president and undermine the Constitution. And then the final blow is, after 5 years, they're going to come back, and we don't know how many pages, but it could be 800, 1,000 pages, very complex legislation. And the members of Congress, they'll probably put it out on the floor. There's not much sense in reading it because you can't amend it, and they'll probably only have a short period of time. And the big issue is, will it pass? And right now, I don't think they should be too cocky about it passing, because there are going to be a lot of people wanting to look into this. And the whole thing is, the world is in a mess economically. And when it is, there is this sentiment of protectionism to solve the problem of not having a free market and not having a sound currency. But protectionism doesn't work. And even if this does do something to open up trade, it doesn't solve the problem of the basic flaws in the economy that motivates people to have protectionism, because currencies are involved. This doesn't and won't solve the problem of the currency wars. I mean, today, we don't have tariff wars like as the main problem. It's the currency wars, and this is how they try to protect. And to take away the country's privilege of inflating and debasing their currency and all, I don't think they're going to achieve this even if they try to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Not only are we prevented from reading it, but it's debatable whether any member of Congress is even bothered to read it. We could probably save a lot of money just by abolishing Congress, because they don't do very much. They hand all the power to the presidency. But, I noticed it was funny, Rubio, the senator from Florida who's running for president, was the 60th vote in the Senate, the critical vote for the passage of the fast track in the Senate. And it was interesting to note that Rand Paul challenged him on whether he actually read it, and said at 800 pages, you would have had to spend 2 calendar days, in the sense that it's called a SCIF, the classified room in the House. You would have had to spend 2 days in there reading it. And it would actually be pretty easy to check, because you do have to check in when you go in there. And
well, maybe you read a summary, a good healthy summary, because there are summaries now of what this plans to do. And I sort of got a kick out of this one summation, and they list all the nice things that they're going to do. But the one thing that they were going to do was guarantee transparency. Here they go 5 years in secret, and they come up with this, and their summation is one thing we're going to do now is we're going to guarantee transparency. I'm thinking that they're competing with the Federal Reserve for secrecy, and they're both, I guess, intertwined, because one controls all the finances in secret, and now we come along with this organization, which is a part of the WTO approach of regulations. It isn't free trade. They call it a free trade agreement. People who don't like free trade vote against it. But it regulates. You go to the WTO and these other places to get permission to put on tariffs and punish them. They actually legalize some of the things that they claim they're getting rid of. But do you think it deals with sanctions? Are they going to deal with us wielding the power of sanctions and driving other nations? And other nations go along with it. So if they pick out a country, we don't like Russia anymore, put on sanctions. We don't like the Syrians, we got to punish them. And we did it to Iraq and all these countries, and that doesn't sound like it. And you hear some of these populists about how we would treat Mexico in trade. Well, I happen to think that, for practical reasons, we ought to be trading more with our neighbors, and it could be done. People will say, how does this be done if the president can't do it? Well, the Congress passes a law, and they can set the tariffs if there's going to eliminate the tariffs. They could set this, and the Congress should be in charge. But right now, it doesn't look like we're moving in this direction. I think it's very dangerous. Dangerous for the undermining of the Constitution, dangerous for the increase in the size of world government. We complained about NAFTA and CAFTA, but those were small compared to this. And this is a big deal, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens. It's sort of sad that we have to depend and help and encourage those people who object to the secrecy for the wrong reasons. Oh yeah, why do you want us to live under the regulations? But they're not interested so much in this constitutional approach. They just don't want somebody messing around with wages or something. They might even come up and say, well, let's get rid of a minimum wage law or something like that. But that wouldn't be the point. I just think that it's a sovereignty issue, and it'll be very interesting to see. I don't have any idea and exactly when this vote will come up, but I would assume that it won't be terribly long from now.
Well, it's almost cliche to invoke Orwell when discussing things these days because it seems more like a manual, how-to manual. He is 84, but the idea that a secret treaty promotes transparency is just, it boggles the mind. It's just hard
that is amazing. And they put it up and they don't even see the inconsistency of stuff. They think, oh yeah. But that's essentially what the Fed has always done with us when we argue the case for auditing the Fed. Oh, but we're transparent. We give you a copy of our minutes 6 weeks later, and we tell you what we're doing. But they don't tell you about all the day-to-day activities and the trading and the bailouts and how they get involved in countries manipulating currencies. And I think they're very much involved in manipulating benefits, for foreign policy purposes too. So. I think one characteristic of a free society is that you know exactly what the government's doing and that the people's privacy should be protected. But guess what? We have a government that totally undermines our privacy. If anybody tries to reveal to us what NSA is doing, they become, treasonous. They're called, charged with treason. At the same time, the government becomes more and more secret. So the issue is government, and just yesterday or so, we talked about governments wants to regulate our guns, but they don't want any regulations on their guns when they try to punish and force other people to do what they think they should do.
And one of the themes that we hit on very often in your show is the idea of the internet being kind of the last bastion of freedom, because we know the mainstream media is corrupt, they lie. We did a show about how most people don't believe them at all anymore, and that's why it's pretty alarming that according to some of the leaked versions of the TPP, it does go after the freedom of the internet. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a pretty good group on a lot of these things, it points out how the TP will require internet service providers to police the internet and to enforce some of the regulations that are in the agreement. For example, it's going to require the providers to terminate the user's internet access for alleged violations of copyrights. So you're just cut off from the internet. It doesn't exist anymore. It requires your internet provider to block a site, so prevent you from being able to access a site if that site is suspected of containing copyright material. So that's a very convenient way of blocking information and forcing companies to disclose the identity of users if they're suspected of engaging in copyright infringement. That's just a few of the things.
It's a constant effort by government to regulate and control the internet because they know that the internet has given us so much more freedom to communicate and to compete with the government. But the internationalists want to have their excuse for regulating on what you just said. But also domestically, there's still a strong effort in Congress to push internet taxation, force all the states to collect taxes, to force the companies to collect sales taxes. So once again, that means, can you imagine every transaction on our internet being looked at to make sure they paid a sales tax? To how many different entities are there that they have to pay for? It's a monster. Matter of fact, this bill is a monster. And let's hope that this bill does not pass. For the most basic reasons. It's unconstitutional, it's vicious, it serves the special interest, it doesn't deal with a weak economy. You cannot solve the problems that come about by saying, yes, we have a lot of economic problems, we need to have more government regulations. Just like what the Fed says, you get into all kinds of financial troubles, and every time we have a major financial crisis, they said we have to regulate to smooth out the mistakes that the Fed makes. Well, in this case, this is an international government that wants to smooth out the mistakes and the problems that we have. What we need to have are free markets. We need to have free trade. We need to have minimal, if no, tariffs going back and forth. And we need sound money so that there's no currency wars. This does not deal with the currency wars. They are not going to remove the sovereignty of individuals running their own currency. They would like to. These individuals who want world government would like a single fiat currency, which practically speaking can't work. The only international currency that can work is one that is based on the market, and that is a precious metals currency. And then you have a unified currency, and you don't have the trade wars. And if you have freedom of trade and, of course, free markets, believe me, the economies of the world wouldn't be in such bad shape that they're demanding and accepting more government. And the TPP means big government at its worst, and let's hope the American people and our Congress wakes up and rejects it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.